Attracting birds in the tropics can be more complicated than in temperate regions. I live in the tropical city of Santa Cruz in Bolivia, and I've come up with a method here at my office to attract the most birds possible, including this gizmo as a slow release mechanism, which I'll talk to you about later. In temperate regions, most birds are attracted to seeds or nuts, whereas in the tropics it's far more complicated. I have my office here, and what I've done is designed just in my back part of the house a series of feeders sort of in a line that would attract the most birds possible. This is a wooden plate with some holes and then some nails placed in it. And this feeder attracts birds that eat fruit, like the Sayaka tanager. I've tried papaya, I've tried mango, but what I found the solution, the easiest one, is bananas. The birds love bananas. So the easiest to put in, I usually put them on. I have 2 nails there, and I just put them on top of the nails, and that holds it in place, and that's all I need for the fruit-eating birds. And that solves the fruit-eating bird part. Now, what you also have are the grain-eating birds. And so this is the feeder that I've come up with for grain-eating birds. And basically, what you have are your, these are like millet seeds that you can buy for pet birds, for budgerigars, whatever. I put some of these out. The saffron finches really like that, house sparrows, some other birds. And then the other solution I've come up with is just bread. Old bread, and I just put out breadcrumbs. So I've had come into bread, creamy-bellied thrush, red-capped cardinal, the seasonal blue and yellow tanager, flycatchers eating bread. Now, one thing you do want to do is you want to avoid mold on your bread. And basically, when I see bread that I think is going to be good for birds and no one's eating it in the house because it's the crusty edge or whatever, is I put it in the freezer, and that stops the mold. Because moldy bread can cause some bill problems that you don't want to transmit to birds. Depending on your region, you can also experiment with oats, ground corn, and rice. So that's sort of your grain-eating bird feeder. And then what I have is for the insectivorous birds that eat insects, like this barred antshrike, I feed them dried mealworms. These ones I can't buy them locally, but I buy them on my travels. And now I'm finding a lot of bird feeding places sell these kind of these packages of them. I buy large ones, and then because you can't get them locally, and then I put them in a little bit at a day. I try to put out 15 to 20, not very many, just because they're, well, not really expensive, but I don't want to go through tons. Now, the biggest problem I found with dried mealworms is that you'll get, because I think it's a very popular food item, you'll get some birds that will just sit down and they'll eat all of them and they'll be done. So I'll put out my 10 in the morning and a saltator, the grayish saltator will come and he'll sit there and eat all of them and leave me empty. So I came up with this slow release mechanism. At night, I put this in the freezer and I put an ice cube tray with worms in the freezer. So in the morning, when I'm putting together all my stuff to come out to do my feeders, I just take the cubes and put them in this already cold thermos, like that. And then this simple mechanism here, I just hang it over top of the center of the feeder, as such. It will slowly drop mealworms throughout the day, opening the possibilities that other insectivorous birds can have something to eat, like house wren and thrush-like wren. By 4 in the afternoon, still there'll be some worms dropping out, but it will give a slow release mechanism so that a lot of the insectivorous birds will be able to find something to eat. Now, the other thing that I've done to, increase the probabilities of attracting birds is this water feature. So basically it's just a plate with some water in it, and then I bought online a mister, and then I have a drip-timed water system in my garden where the tube sits over the water dish. So the mister collects mist on the tube then drips into the water. And you do that because the sound of water often will attract birds, even though the movement. And that just increases the probabilities that other species might come and visit the feeders. And I have a hummingbird feeder, but I find the lazy way to go about hummingbird feeding is instead of putting out a feeder, just to plant lots of flowers in the area. And pretty much now I have enough flowers that I always have hummingbirds visiting the garden, and I don't need to be working on filling out a feeder in that. Also, if you want effective hummingbird feeders in the tropics, you need to be changing the sugar water at least every other day. I find in the tropics, you have to worry more about rodents than in temperate latitudes. And you don't want to create a feeder where you're attracting lots of birds, but also lots of rats and mice. So I have everything based on a string, which only has 2 connection points. So this is on the wall, which has hard access. This is on a grating, which again isn't very easily accessible. And then everything hangs from the tube. What I also try to do is never put more food than what's needed for the day. So my try to manage it where it's pretty much running out of food by the end of the day. And that way you're not, you don't have nocturnal mammals that are coming and eating that. And then on both ends, I have cloth that I spray with insecticide, and that stops the ants from coming in, because I found some of the ants, if they discover like bread, or they discover the mealyworms, will eat everything. And the mealyworms are so attracted to ants that I've actually come up with the ant guard to stop ants from coming down. No es cierto. One also, just to mention, but you want to avoid that your feeder becomes a cat feeder. This is one method of stopping cats from feeding at your feeder. Obviously, having them hang up helps, because you're not creating an easy hunting area